Well, then what happens when North Korea hits 1,000?
That's absurd. They're nowhere near 1,000. It's time for some more Johnny Harris. Specifically, nukes are way scarier than you think. I suppose it's relative. For those of you who don't know me, I'm Tyler Folse. I'm a nuclear engineer with a little over 10 years of experience in the commercial nuclear power industry. From engineering to operations to emergency response. I don't claim to know everything there is nuclear, but I can certainly share some knowledge. Let's see.
I'm in Washington, D.C. right now, and I want to visualize for you what it would look like if a nuclear weapon landed on the nation's capital. So, for our scenario, there is an...
Of course, he's right in the heart of the National Mall. I wonder if he's going to use Independence Day logic and say you're going to hit the Washington Monument or the Lincoln Memorial or something directly.
Nuclear weapon headed towards the city right now. A large nuclear weapon flying, headed towards Washington, D.C.
Okay, so that one has multiple warheads. Those are known as MIRVs, multiple independently targeted reentry vehicles. So that is one missile carrying multiple warheads that could hit multiple targets.
The actual bomb is actually in here. This cone that's about 2 meters tall, 6 feet. It's falling back into the atmosphere. Here it comes.
Interesting, he's showing just one of them. Perhaps the other ones in this simulation are targeting other cities.
And then...
Yes, the Washington Monument. All right. I think in Independence Day, they at least hit the White House.
For a moment, right here is the hottest thing in our solar system, hotter than the sun.
No, not even a little bit. So that fireball right there is not going to be hotter than the sun. Maybe the surface, but no. If that indeed was hotter than the sun's core, nuclear weapons would be way more destructive than they actually are.
100 million degrees Celsius.
No. All right. So 100 million C is an upper estimate, and that's usually used in controlled fusion reactors, such as tokamaks. And nuclear fusion can momentarily create temperatures in the tens of millions Celsius, but it's not that large of an area. We're talking the area where the fusion happened. Something on the order of a few kilograms, not whatever this is. The fireball is going to be hot, but by the time it's expanded this far out, we're talking several thousand degrees. If this was millions, you'd get third-degree burns over 500 miles away, which you don't.
As it expands out, everything around it turns into dust. I mean, smaller than dust. Atoms are...
Within the initial fireball and the center area, sure, but not within the size of this.
Are ripped apart. This fireball instantly...
Okay, he mentioned atoms are ripped apart. It does not tear atoms apart within the fireball. Atoms being ripped apart is nuclear fission, which is actually used as a trigger for the fusion stage of a thermonuclear weapon. But nuclei is going to remain attacked at ground zero. Only the highly enriched uranium or plutonium is going to fission in this case. Dirt, buildings, you're not fissioning buildings with this. Smaller than dust, okay, sure, right at ground zero, things will be vaporized, but you're not fissioning what it comes into contact with.
It vaporizes everything within a half-a-mile radius.
Okay, vaporization with half a mile depends on the size and the detonation height. If this is a big one on the order of, say, a megaton or more at an altitude of several hundred meters, so this thing would have to detonate a lot higher up than the Washington Monument in order to have that kind of blast radius.
And here comes the blast wave. A wall of high-pressure air that is moving faster than the speed of sound. It creates wind
That's accurate.
behind it that is faster than anything ever observed in nature.
On Earth, sure.
Everything within 2.5 miles is leveled.
So, no nuclear weapon can guarantee total destruction over exact concentric zones. I mean, so sorry if you have one of these and you want to make a warranty claim or something like that and say it only destroyed 90%, you're not going to get your money back.
And then there's the heat wave, which burns everything within 5 miles.
Okay, the thermal pulse. Yes.
Nearly everyone in this city is either dead or severely injured.
DC is not exactly a sprawling city, so with the megaton class, the right elevation, sure. But I have a problem with him saying everyone because, again, it's not guaranteed. I mean, the thermal pulse is going to be the third-degree burns setting on fire zone, which isn't necessarily deadly. I mean, the entire area, considering the destructive nature of this, it's going to be very hard to get medical attention afterwards, but I still have a problem with saying everyone when you're talking this far away. I mean, the actual fireball, sure, but that's not the same thing as the thermal pulse.
Everything that can be on fire is now on fire as this huge mushroom cloud rises into the air.
The thermal pulse is actually faster than that. You're not going to wait for the mushroom cloud to become visible. Thermal radiation wave is way faster than buoyancy of dust, which is what actually creates the mushroom cloud.
Dragging with it a storm of dust, dirt, and debris. But this isn't normal dust anymore. The bomb has done something to it, to its atoms, making them fall apart in slow motion, shooting out invisible, deadly...
You're not fissioning dust. No. That's not even remotely accurate.
Energy. This poison dust drifts all across this region. It clings to...
Okay, that little clip right there he used. So he used Nuke Map to model fallout from the wind.
Soil and plants and people hundreds of miles away.
So what causes fallout plumes is mainly going to depend on the weather as far as the direction, hence why he showed that map. But I think he's trying to be poetic and a bit stylized here, but no. Most radiation from fallout occurs within the first few days. Short-lived, such as iodine-131, there's a reason why at nuclear power plants, for a large early release, the unit used is often referred to as dose-equivalent iodine, because that's going to be the most hazardous during that particular interval of time. Cesium-137 and strontium-90 are longer-lived, and long-term fallout does exist, but poisonous dust, that's going to be an overstatement.
These poisoned atoms will keep firing off radiation for years, for decades, centuries, even thousands of years.
No. Okay. So iodine-131 is short-lived. Cesium-137 and strontium-90 have a half-life of 30 years. But the vast majority of radioactivity is going to be within the first 3 days. And thousands of years, no, it would have decayed away. He's showing a picture of the infamous Ferris wheel in Pripyat, and that's already experienced more than one half-life. For cesium-137 and strontium-90, the vast majority of it's decayed away.
This is a disaster that humans made, and that was just for one of these cones. A rocket fired from an American submarine can carry 8 of these cones at once.
Sure, so he's referring to something like a Trident II sub-launched ballistic missile. It can carry multiple. They're not necessarily all fully loaded with 8. Some of them even have fakes in there trying to overwhelm missile defense systems, but not all missiles and not all countries have MIRV missiles with full MIRV capacity.
All of those hit one target, it would be a much worse situation.
Actually, no. If they're spread out and you strike 8 cities all at once, I would say that's way worse, because one city that's hit can get emergency response teams from its neighboring cities. You destroy an entire region of 8, then that is far worse.
A lot of global politics centers around this, making sure this does not happen. But everything...
This referring to the nuclear test that made that?
I just showed you is very possible. We
nuclear weapons going off, sure, but the way he explained it, no.
Have the capabilities to do this right now. And in fact, a lot of countries have their finger on the trigger, able to launch one of these at a moment's notice. And
it's possible to make decisions quickly, but to actually perform the operation of launching, that takes a little longer than that.
I've spent a very long time trying to understand why. Why have we done this? And why these nuclear weapons, which were famous during the Cold War, are back They're back in a new way. They're once again becoming the center of global politics.
We are entering one of the most dangerous periods in nuclear history. We're on the cusp of this third age. That nuclear is back.
That's Sam from Search Party. He also made a video about nuclear weapons, but it's different than mine. It went live yesterday. In this video, I'm going to show you how these things work, what countries have them, and how they're used on the global stage.
Is that person a nuclear expert? I don't actually know.
And then Sam's video will take you into this specific moment in time and what to look out for going forward. Help you understand why nuclear weapons are back on the world stage. We're headed into a world that is more and more informed by nuclear weapons and nuclear politics. So it's time we start paying attention. Let me show you.
All right, I'm not at all sure what he means by any of that, but let's just keep going, because I have a few problems with what he said about the third age versus the way things were at the peak of the Cold War, but let's just see.
Everyone's telling me that they don't like that my screen shakes. Listen, I can't help it. This thing's big, it's unruly.
It doesn't bother me.
Sorry.
Probably wouldn't have noticed it unless you said it.
What is this thing? Well, it's a bomb, obviously, a very destructive bomb.
Right.
And it's one that messes with the very building blocks of everything, the atom.
Atoms are the tiny building blocks.
I mean, you can argue that anything made of atoms uses them, but all right, it uses fission, I think is what he's going with.
Which make up everything in the world.
So an atom, of course, is the smallest unit of matter.
Oh, I'm smarter every day.
Right? And it's made up of several subatomic particles, electrons, protons, neutrons.
I talked to Destin from the YouTube channel Smarter Every Day. He's a real scientist, engineer. He's making a bunch of videos on nuclear energy. And
I've seen some of those. If you'd like to see my take on it, I'll pin it in a comment down below.
Because I wanted to make sure I was grounded in my understanding of the physics of a nuclear bomb. Everything.
By the way, I'm not sure if you're watching, but if you or any other larger YouTuber wants to talk about nuclear for an upcoming video, please feel free to reach out.
Is atoms. Everything that you can touch, the air, everything is atoms. Different kinds of atoms. And these atoms have a little secret hiding in them. Every single atom can be turned into energy. Like actually matter.
So he's talking about the strong nuclear force that holds atoms together, okay?
Like atoms and energy are the same thing, they're just in different states.
When I was growing up, Dad used to always say matter is frozen energy.
Like this could be turned into energy, and actually a lot of energy that could like fuel a car or like power my house or like fly me to the moon. And it doesn't take that much mass to create a lot of energy. Let me show you this really quick. This little piece of metal is probably a little more than a gram.
Okay.
Not very heavy. Not a lot of mass, right?
I'm not sure.
If we zoom way into this little clip, you're gonna see a bunch of atoms.
Uh-huh.
Now, there are some powerful forces working on this atom, keeping the nucleus really tightly glued together.
That's the strong nuclear force, okay.
Keeping the atoms separate from each other so they don't like blob into one another.
Okay, that's going to be the electromagnetic force.
And thank God for this, because otherwise nothing would be solid. You would sit in a chair and just sort of fall through.
Sure, this would be a complete different version of physics. I'm not even going to try to speculate.
There's a lot of forces happening down with the atoms, keeping everything stable, everything solid. We like these forces. They make it so that my little paperclip thingy doesn't explode and everything doesn't just sort of spontaneously come apart. Stable, good.
Those forces, those subatomic forces are very, very strong.
Now you can break these forces holding atoms together. If you rock their world hard enough, they will kind of rearrange. They will break.
Okay, that was fusion. Good luck overcoming the Coulomb barrier on something like paperclip.
They'll quickly like reorganize to try to form some sort of stable atom. But in the process, a little bit of matter is left with nowhere to go. It can't bond to anything. And so it spontaneously turns into energy.
Okay, what he's referring to is a mass defect from nuclear reaction. So Not the best example, because it takes way more energy if you're gonna fuse something like carbon or aluminum or whatever material he's trying to get at than you would ever gain out of said mass defect, because just saying those are not something that is an ideal candidate for fusion. You're gonna want to use isotopes of hydrogen, such as deuterium and tritium. And even that's hard on Earth. The sun does it, yes. The change in MC squared, delta MC squared. What's left over, he just talked about fusion. That same phenomena also happens when you split atoms apart. It's a mass defect. The mass defect from fissioning a uranium is what powers a nuclear power plant. It's where the heat comes from.
Every single thing around you, everything, could be turned into energy. An enormous amount of energy. How much energy?
Okay, that is quite misleading. Most matter cannot be converted into energy efficiently. So, uranium-235, plutonium-239, fissile material that can fission and get the energy. I also mentioned deuterium and tritium as fusion fuel. Converting everyday objects like a paperclip requires conditions beyond what is technologically or energetically feasible. So no, you are not doing this with anything. It's not worth it. It also might not even be possible based on our current technology.
I'm glad you asked, because this is the moment that I've been waiting for since I was a child, where in my real adult career, I'm going to be able to invoke the famous equation of our very own Albert Einstein.
E equals mc squared?
Yep, I'm doing this. I'm doing the chalkboard thing. For those of you who already know about E equals
Something tells me this is going to be a bit off.
MC squared and exactly what it means, skip 45 seconds ahead.
I'll go ahead and hear you out.
Because I'm about to explain it in a way that I've always wanted someone to explain it to me.
Okay, great.
And I'm going to do that for you.
I'll take this as coaching on my own ability to explain nuclear things. Maybe.
Could have guessed that was going to happen.
Gotta add some humor in there. I appreciate that. It's very small, too.
What does Einstein say about how much energy is contained in my little paperclippy thing? The E is energy.
I think I know where he's
The
going
M
with this.
is mass. How much mass are we turning into energy? And the C is the speed of light in meters per second. Speed of...
Technically, you can put it in any unit you want. You just have to convert everything else. You can have the speed of light in fathoms per fortnight if you really wanted to. Just you'd have to convert the mass into something else. But you just have to get the dimensions right.
The mass of my paperclip is 1 gram, because this is in kilograms.
Okay, yeah. If you're gonna use grams, then yeah, convert to kilograms, and keeping your speed of light in meters per second is probably the best way to do it.
It's gonna be 0.001. I just need to times this by speed of light squared is about 299 million meters per second. But
Call it 3 times 10 to the 8, just to be conservative. This is something that comes up. I mean, yeah, you can have all that precision, but are you really sure that that paperclip is exactly 1 gram?
we have to times it by itself, which comes out to be 89 quadrillion 875 trillion 570
So this is going to be in joules.
billion 873 million 681,760.
Is he getting a peer check? Sounds like it.
Whoa. So my paperclip mass times this.
Now, a
Einstein
joule is a pretty small unit, but yeah, rest energy is quite enormous.
says we have to multiply that big number by the mass of this paperclip to find out how much energy is inside of it.
Okay, move your decimal point a few spaces.
And if you do that math with my 1 gram, you get 89 trillion joules. That's enough energy to power 100,000 homes for 2 weeks.
Okay, sure. I mean, it's a very simple equation to apply. Here's the problem, though. This is 100% mass energy conversion. So what he's describing isn't nuclear fission or nuclear fusion. We are doing full-on matter-antimatter annihilation. So I guess you have half a paperclip and then half an anti-paperclip, and you're completely annihilating everything with 100% efficiency. And even if we did have antimatter reactors, not all of it's going to annihilate. I mean, fission in U-235, for instance, in a nuclear power plant, only converts 0.1% of its mass into energy. So the usable energy, even if this was antimatter, so not a paperclip, if this was antimatter interacting with matter, is going to be far, far less. Because ultimately, we're not making any power plant, whether it uses coal, natural gas, uranium, plutonium, or antimatter with 100% efficiency. And in real nuclear weapons, you're only using a few kilograms of fissile material. All right, maybe it's if this was a paperclip in the warp core on the USS Enterprise, sure.
Or one home for 2,000 years. Just inside of this. Because of that. Okay, giant caveat for everyone watching, and those who study physics will be clamoring for this. You can't actually do that with like an iron paperclip. The amount of energy you would need to like turn this into energy would sort of be more than the energy you get out of it.
Absolutely. Iron is too stable. It's actually at the bottom end of a nuclear binding energy curve. So it's not going to release energy by fusion or fission, and it's not antimatter. So not annihilation, I should say, either.
Actually do this to release the energy from matter, you need different kinds of atoms, like big unstable ones, like the ones we see in uranium. My point here is not that this is ever...
Or really small ones like hydrogen, in the case of fusion.
We're gonna like break and turn into energy, but that when you mess with atoms, the bonds within atoms, and you release a little bit of matter into energy, you don't need very much to create a huge amount. That's what we're about to see in real life.
So fission is a big atom splitting. Fusion, little atoms coming together.
I had a fun time watching Destin show me how fission works in his studio with his very cute looking neutrons and mousetraps. He made a whole video about it that you can check out. Now, for most of the time,
that one was pretty
the
good.
only place that this sort of turning matter into energy was happening was not here on Earth, but in the center of stars.
And this is the kind of stuff that happens in...
There actually was an ancient nuclear reactor that was purely artificial. Just happened to be a natural seep, and it managed to have a self-sustaining fission reaction. Billions of years ago, but it's fascinating.
the core of the sun, for example.
But here we're
Where
talking
immense
about
heat
fusion.
and pressure is smashing atoms together so hard that they fuse. They rearrange a little bit of matter that isn't fused turns into energy, and you get the literal sun. That's called fusion. But then, in the 1900s, the humans on Earth decided they wanted to start to do something like this themselves. As I talked about, nuclear politics is ramping up in a new way. Iran is the best example of where this is clearly happening, where there's just like a lot of secrecy and vague information as a negotiating tactic, and it's a really normal let's keep talking about nukes.
We want one.
It was the 1930s in
Nuclear power, yes. I'm not a fan of weapons, though.
Germany, and some scientists were tinkering with atoms, and they found a way to break some atoms apart and get in on this insanity of E equals MC squared.
Pretty crazy how safe nuclear power is. But nuclear weapons are scary, aren't they?
Yes, nuclear power is extremely safe. Thank you.
Yeah.
When uranium-235 exists in nature, it's not real happy. It's kind of unstable. If a U-235 atom ever gets...
U-235 doesn't show up very often in nature, but yeah, I would actually say it's less happier than U-238 since it has a shorter half-life. A mere several million years as opposed to 5 billion years in the case of uranium-238.
hit by a neutron, which I happen to have a neutron here.
Yeah.
If U-235 ever gets hit by a neutron, then it gets really unstable. And then it breaks apart. That right there breaks into two other atoms. I threw my neutron across the room. That's dangerous when you got U-235 around. I think of U-235...
It can actually break into three. Ternary fission is not unheard of. The third one, though, is usually going to be an alpha particle or a helium nucleus.
like a mousetrap.
But the other two, there's no set pattern. It's all a probability function of what they actually happen to split into.
So if you think about it, you've got this atom chilling out, and it's got all these neutrons right there, ready to go. If it ever gets triggered, then it will fire, and it will throw off these other neutrons, and they go off. And so if you have a clever arrangement of more U-235 atoms around that, then you can start what's called a chain reaction.
Yep, and that is the entire science of reactor engineering. That is to say, optimizing your fuel loading in your nuclear power plant so you have a nice, smooth, stable reaction that powers millions of homes for typically 18 to 24 months at a time before refueling, but there are some reactors that can last longer than that.
Those neutrons bombard other uranium atoms, causing them to split and split still others. The result? A chain reaction.
They were doing fission.
Okay, and in that case, if you can arrange them in a certain way to create a bomb, but you need way more uranium-235, over 90% enrichment, and you have to deliberately arrange the thing so it will go prompt critical. That is to say, said chain reaction cycles will happen in a teeny tiny fraction of a second compared to delayed critical in the case of a nuclear power plant, where it's slower and more controlled. All by design.
Breaking of big unstable atoms apart. And this wasn't as powerful as the fusion, the combining of atoms that's happening in the center of the sun, but
that's true, but it's way easier to achieve. To clarify, they said more uranium nuclei. The key thing is it releases more neutrons to keep the reaction going in the case of a chain reaction.
it was still unlike anything the world had ever seen.
Under Hitler, the country was becoming the dominant power in Central Europe.
Germany was kind of getting ready to take over the entire world, and so they thought, what if we weaponize this new nuclear braking thing we invented? And Einstein, the E equals MC squared guy, was alive at this time and watching his equations be turned into weapons. And Einstein writes this letter.
Germany never successfully made a nuclear weapon.
To the American president, urging the U.S. to make the bomb before Germany does.
Okay.
And this is where we get into Oppenheimer, the Manhattan Project, brilliant physicists building atomic bombs in the desert, racing against time during World War II. The U.S., of course, wins this race for the nuclear weapon. They drop 2 of these fission bombs on Japan in 1945.
Yep, those were fission-only bombs. No fusion took place in these.
The war is over, and the world has changed forever. Nothing would ever be the same. It was the beginning of a new way of global conflict. A few years later, the Soviets made one of their own, and thus begins a new race. Who can make the bigger bomb?
One clarification, Einstein didn't see his equations become bombs. He wasn't part of the Manhattan Project, and he only signed the letter that he showed about warning FDR that the chain reactions were actually possible. And again, I don't know where he got the whole information about the German nuclear weapons program. That one stalled. They just simply didn't have the resources. They also had some misconceptions, and there was a bit of sabotage by the Allies involved.
And this is where the U.S. is like, let's not just do the thing where we break atoms apart. Let's do what the sun is doing. Fuse the atoms together.
Do what the sun is doing.
That's way more powerful. And they figure it out just a few years later.
So one thing about that is true, but it needs fission in order to make a fusion weapon. Fusion bombs can reach megaton yields, but they require a fission bomb within it to trigger it. So it's really more of a team effort between fission and fusion, as far as to how the fusion bombs or thermonuclear weapons or H-bombs is another name for it.
And the results are insane.
Those are capable of megatons of power. 1,000 times more powerful.
Neil deGrasse
Because
Tyson.
apparently leveling a city was not powerful enough.
Depends on the size of the city, I suppose. Anatomy.
Let me show you what today's nukes look like and how they work. This is a modern nuclear weapon, sometimes called a thermonuclear weapon, hydrogen bomb.
Okay.
This cone is about the same height as an American male. And the actual bomb is in here. We don't know exactly how big it is, but we know it's shaped like a peanut.
The 2 stages.
This cone needs to be mounted on something.
As far as fission materials, we're only talking on the order of kilograms.
To deliver it to the target. In this example, it's on a huge rocket. That flies to space, can carry this nuke like over 1,000 kilometers away. Eventually the rocket part falls away, and the cone starts falling towards its target.
Falling cone.
And then, when it hits its pre-programmed altitude, it detonates. But watch what happens. This is crazy. It's actually 3.
I'm glad you mentioned pre-programmed altitude. They're designed to be airburst weapons to maximize their destructive potential.
Bombs. It starts with just a regular old explosive bomb, no nuclear stuff yet.
To trigger the
But this
fission.
bomb inside of this very small peanut-shaped space triggers a fission bomb, the first type that we invented, the one that overcomes the forces keeping an atom stable and breaks them apart and turns a tiny bit of matter into a huge amount of energy. So there is a fission reaction happening.
By the way, the speed of all of this is happening, we're talking on the order of a few nanoseconds.
And that shoots out a huge amount of energy at the speed of light that bounces off all the...
Okay, it's not that fast. Energy's released quickly, but not at the speed of light. Neutron-induced fission, in fact, this part right here, not the whole part, happens on the femtosecond scale. That's 10 to the minus 15 seconds, and it does propagate via kinetic energy, fission fragments, secondary neutrons, and gamma rays. The gamma rays are the only thing in there that's going at light speed, because gamma rays are just high-energy light. But the neutrons, no, you're not having light speed neutrons.
Shiny beryllium walls, and then it hits this, and this is the final one.
Shiny beryllium walls. So beryllium is used in neutron reflectors, so it's not for light, it's for neutrons to basically keep them contained so they can cause more and more reactions. It's basically designed as a tool to increase the efficiency of fission.
It's so hot in here, 100 million degrees Celsius, that we're basically in the core of a star.
Hotter, actually, and again, it's not 100 million degrees for long.
It's actually hotter than the core of our sun. Hot enough to do things that stars do. So now in this third bomb, the big one,
what's interesting is, and they need to be much hotter than the core of the sun, because the sun has all that gravitational pressure designed to provide the necessary pressure and confinement time to induce nuclear fusion. Unfortunately, or fortunately, I guess I should say, we don't have anything like that on Earth. So we just got to go hotter.
hydrogen atoms are being smashed together into a new form. A little bit of matter is escaping into E equals mc squared, being multiplied by the speed of light squared, and what you get is total destruction.
It says total destruction, but not everything. You're still not getting 100% efficiency out of what is actually used in the weapon.
Yeah, I mean, we made that. That is possible. Those big ones have never been used in war.
That's true, not directly. Only Hiroshima and Nagasaki, which were fission only, and no fusion bombs have actually been detonated in an active war, sure.
And hopefully they never will. Okay, but how big are these? Let's put them on a city. My city, Washington, D.C. Terrible thought, but we gotta do this exercise.
You gonna go back out to the mall?
If you were to drop a fission bomb, like the ones we dropped on Japan, that killed hundreds of thousands, it would look like this. Upgrade that to a fusion bomb, like the ones deployed.
I mean, those numbers are pretty close. I could tell he used the nuke map tool, which I find to be pretty accurate.
Today, and it would look like this.
Okay, 475 kilotons. And that's considered to be typical. It's by no means one of the bigger ones, but typical for what you see today.
Estimated 350,000 people dead in minutes. During the Cold War, we made these things huge. If you detonate the biggest fusion bomb ever tested, it would look like this.
Yeah, 50 megatons. Thankfully, only one of them was built. There was a 100 megaton untested one, but this was a very impractical weapon, very easy to intercept. It couldn't even fit in the bomb bay doors of the bomber that was designed, so it would be this big, juicy radar signature, so easy to intercept even back in the 1960s.
The city would be gone, and people 40 miles away in like Baltimore would have life-threatening burns from the heat wave.
Yeah, provided it actually made it to its target. Sure, I mean, DC and Baltimore are pretty close together. 300
square miles of buildings destroyed. I mean...
You can't guarantee destruction from things that far out. I mean, they're going to be varying levels of destroyed. The things at the center will be vaporized, and then varying levels of structural damage will decrease proportionally, or should I say quadratically, as you get further away from the ground zero.
I mean, this is a horrible possibility that we have invented, and we have a lot.
I wouldn't put Tsar-Bomba specifically as a legitimate possibility, but the other ones, yeah.
A lot of them.
Oh, and as far as a lot of them, no. In the case of Tsar-Bomba, it was just the one.
Let's look at a map. I like looking at maps. We can't go too long without looking at a map.
Maps are fun.
Today, there are around 12,000 nuclear
is this the
warheads
declassified target
somewhere
list?
on Earth. That's 12,000. 12,000. That's enough firepower to level every sizable city on the planet several times over.
So the 12,000 number, that's fairly accurate, and provided they actually hit and were used, I don't know what his definition of sizable city, but yeah, 12,000 nukes, 12,000 cities, sure.
The world used to have way more, like more than triple that during the Cold
It was over 60,000.
War. Almost every one of these nuclear warheads today is in the hands of two countries, the US and Russia.
It's about 90%.
But in total, there are 9 countries that possess these destructive bombs. And one of these countries doesn't admit that they have nuclear weapons, but they do. And
50's probably pushing it for North Korea, but that's probably at the high end.
America's nukes aren't just in America. They're scattered all over the world. In ally countries, on land, in air, deep in the ocean, lurking in submarines, in a configuration that the US calls.
So all over the world, there are some, and if you count tactical nukes, the smaller ones, some even less than a kiloton, or on the order of kilotons, I should say, not less than a kiloton. Some tactical nukes are in NATO countries that the US is allied with, but the bulk of strategic nukes, the big ones that he was talking about, the 400, 500 kilotons, megatons, are in US soil and in submarines, not in foreign countries. Should be fairly obvious as to why.
Its nuclear posture. It's one of the most important parts of America's military strategy today, and we're about to see how it actually works in real life. Because these 12,000 nukes shape our entire world. Their threat is ever present, and so it turns the chessboard of geopolitics into a different thing than it was before.
Sure, I'm not going to argue that.
Nuclear weapons, of course, did revolutionize warfare, right? So Bernard Brodie in 1946 calls them the absolute weapon. He says that basically before the bomb was invented, the fundamental purpose of military establishments was to plan for, fight, and win wars, and now it would be to prevent them altogether.
So, what stops countries from nuking each other? Well, my camera's
mutual
shaking
assured
again.
Destruction, deterrence.
See in the comments, folks. I don't have a way to stabilize
also
this in
alliances.
a way that really keeps it from bouncing around. If you have suggestions on a better camera arm, I'll take it. So the central idea of all of this is pretty simple, pretty intuitive, kind of, but then it kind of messes with your brain in weird ways, and we'll see how that works. You've got these two big empires. They're rivals. They're competing with each other.
Germany and Poland have been taken over by two people. Okay.
Big countries do and have always done, and maybe someday they won't, but they do for now. If there's no nukes in this equation, history has taught us that these two big empires will fight each other. Over land, over influence, over resources, over honor, over who knows.
What about all the other non-existent countries that border them? If that's the case, you'd think they would expand the other direction and be the path of least resistance.
They will fight each other. That always has happened. That is the central thread of humanity, is big, powerful entities will fight each other. And
we're getting into philosophy and social contract theory.
Recent centuries, it's gotten really destructive. Think of Europe and Asia in the 1940s. Countries are fighting because there's a chance that one of them can win. Okay, now, after 1945, put nukes on the board and watch what happens.
I just have a problem with that statement about countries will always fight unless deterred by nukes. It's reductive. Wars also depend on economics, diplomacy, alliances, and other non-nuclear deterrents. Could be cyber capabilities, for instance. Not every rival nation pair without nukes is going to fight each other. I don't think I have to say that.
It's a new weapon that could inflict damage of the kind that we just never before imagined in human history.
Now, if these two empires get into a war with each other, they both know that it will escalate. They will keep using more and more extreme force until eventually one side will use nukes, to which the other will respond with their own nukes. And then it's game over for everyone.
Provided they have enough, but okay.
Nobody wins, everybody loses, the world is on fire, the concept of victory becomes irrelevant because everyone's dead. This creates a calculus of fear, an understanding that you will inflict way more consequences on yourself if you go to war with your geopolitical rival. And this threat of total destruction is stronger than the urge to fight and dominate. After World War II, after we witnessed this destructive bomb in Hiroshima and Nagasaki, something changed. We crossed a line of understanding that there really was something that could really sort of end it all.
It's about convincing the other side that attacking is just not worth it. Convincing both sides that the price is just too high. And unfortunately, that means deterrence.
Deterrence. That is the word. That is the key concept. Comes from this root of like avoidance of something because of terror. Fear. Terror prevents you from acting.
Go down into its Latin roots. And
weirdly, strangely, paradoxically kind of works. Though this is debated by scholars, and when I was in grad school for peace and conflict resolution, there was a lot of compelling evidence that deterrence doesn't work, but I'm not getting into the literature right now. It is widely accepted that one of the
he's simplifying this because he's clearly studied stuff like this before. It just seems, I don't know, high level, but oversimplifying this is a little, I don't know, just is kind of a bad taste in my mouth. Maybe I'm the only one. Maybe you don't think so.
Major reasons great powers have not gone to war with each other directly in the last 70, 80 years is because of nuclear weapons. For those who want to dispute that claim, I am so stoked for your good faith argument.
Okay, I'll take a stab at it. I'm not a geopolitics expert, but I don't know. You got things like economic interdependence on one another, the whole global village argument, diplomacy. There's also proxy wars that have occurred during the Cold War, such as Vietnam and Afghanistan, and also just domestic constraints. People just war with the boogeyman or bad guy on the other side just isn't necessarily the biggest priority for your nation. Okay, that was just off the top of my head.
Sent in the comments. I will read it and respond because I love this stuff. Anyway, global politics today leans heavily on this grim logic, this balance of deterrence created by very destructive bombs that split atoms. But in order for deterrence to work, it can't just be the bombs. It has to have some other important ingredients.
Okay.
First up, the threat needs to be believable. It needs to be credible. Your enemy has to believe that you will act.
That's true when issuing any sort of threat or ultimatum. It has to be credible. I'm not going to debate that.
Credibly fire back a nuke. That you're not just making empty threats and bluffing all of the time, that you actually have the ability and appetite to fire one of these things off. What that means is you got to have these things ready to go at all times. You got to have maps of targets to hit. Thousands of targets in some cases, like here in these giant maps in a bunker command center that the US had, showing all the targets in the Soviet Union that they were ready to hit. The Soviets, of course, had a similar map of all the targets they were ready to hit. During the Cold War, the US had a bomber plane with a nuke on it in the air 24/7 for 8 years. Like, it wasn't the same plane.
Yes, and occasionally they would drop them inadvertently, which is horrifying, and also I'm just thinking from a nuclear safety standpoint, let alone the international incident standpoint.
And they were obviously doing patrols, but there was always one in the air ready to drop a nuke. And this is why it remained...
When I say they dropped one, it didn't actually go off, thankfully.
Cold War. But the Soviet Union fell and the big standoff kind of chilled out a little bit. But today, credibility is just as important to all of the nuclear powers, especially the big dogs, US, China, Russia. They all still have their nukes pointed...
China has some, but they don't have nearly as many as the US or Russia.
...at each other all the time.
Targeting plans and warheads are ready for rapid deployment, but they're not always on a hair trigger alert. The US and Russia... I mean, they have their history. They maintain a portion of forces on high alert, but China less so, based on what we know.
And all three make it really easy to make the decision to launch one. They centralize the decision making into one person, the top leader. Like in the United States, we do this. The president is the sole authority.
Okay, so in the US, launch procedures can be executed quickly on the order of minutes, but the process is highly regimented, requires multiple authentications, and is designed to prevent unauthorized use. It's not meant to be easy. It's meant to be prompt, but not easy. Just like emergency response procedures in a nuclear power plant are designed to be prompt, but it requires training and it requires procedures, just like anything else.
Who can authorize a nuclear strike. And legally, no one can veto his decision. He could launch a nuke within 5 minutes using some...
He's not launching a nuke within 5 minutes. He can make a decision in 5 minutes. But actual launch takes longer to prepare the ICBM or to prepare the sub-launch nuke or the bomber wing or whatever tool that is going to be used. But just want to clarify, 5 minutes is the decision-making time. Time-critical decision-making actions are calculated and vetted for emergency response procedures at a nuclear power plant as well. And it's not the actual process is 5 minutes of the missile hitting its target or even getting the missile in the air.
Special authorization codes and relying on this football. I know it's not a football. It's a briefcase, but it's called the nuclear football. And inside of this, there's a phone and a scary black book that lists out all of the potential targets.
Not to be confused with someone's little black book. So what it contains is options and response plans, and it's not an assassin's notebook. Actually holds scenarios, and to be fair, given the numbers we're talking about, if it were like an assassin's notebook, it would be much too cumbersome to use.
That the president could authorize a strike on. How many people would die, what the effect would be. It's all right there, by his side all the time. And for those wondering, yes, it's that kind of football. Sorry, world. This is America.
Oh, okay. I was thinking it's owned by Wilson. Okay.
Okay, the next ingredient to deterrence is the ability to hit back. Meaning, if one nuclear country is able to destroy all of your nukes in a surprise attack, then the whole thing falls apart. They now are not deterred because they can disarm you. So you gotta have more than one nuke, and you kinda gotta spread them out and hide them. The US does this by spreading its nukes out all throughout the world and dividing them up by delivery methods. Some are sitting in these big underground silos that are spread all across the middle of the country. There's just rockets in here, ready to launch at a moment's notice. Others are sitting on airplanes positioned all around the globe. And as of 2 weeks ago, the US positioned 10 of its bombers.
Yep, they sometimes station, though they're not necessarily permanently parked with nuclear warheads, especially in foreign countries.
Probably carrying nukes here on this tiny little island in the Indian Ocean called Diego Garcia, which I've made a video about and want to.
Okay, I've heard of this island. I've heard it as speculative. Maybe he explains it more in his other video. There might be some information I'm missing, but it hosts bomber infrastructure, but nuclear deployment is speculative and unverified.
Make another video about because it's wild. And yeah, there's just nukes on this island. North Korea, China, Russia, Iran. Beware, there's nukes here, says the United States.
He seems to
think so. And then,
of
course, we've got nukes lurking in the depths.
Ultimately, it doesn't really matter for his point, though, so I get it.
Of the ocean, sitting on submarines, these underwater buildings that are weapons and bases and command centers all in one. They can carry up to...
Not to mention they are nuclear powered, so you don't have to refuel them for a while.
20 missiles, each of them with multiple warheads. Like, the amount of destruction capability designed into these weapons is kind of unfathomable, and that's kind of the point. It has to be so...
I don't get where it's unfathomable. I mean, he even calculated, okay, it's measured in kilotons or megatons. They're big, they're not unfathomable. You can fathom and model the destructive models quite a bit. I mean, it even mentioned it in the nuclear football. They are clearly modeled. That would be like saying my nuclear power plant's power output is unfathomable. No, it's actually measured about 10 different ways because it is a critical parameter.
So bad, so easy to launch that your enemy's like not messing with that. Anyway, these different
I'm not going to say easy. It's regimented, procedured, and operators are trained on how to do it, but I have a problem with easy.
Delivery systems are called the nuclear triad. Russia has something like it too. China's kind of developing their own triad. And all of this is so that we have that second ingredient of deterrence, the ability to strike back. These things are safe from a surprise.
But also it's an argument of redundancy and diversity in the sense of multiple ways to essentially do the same thing. Different ways and redundancy, more of the same, which is why there's a lot of them. Just like you have it for safety systems in a nuclear power plant. I mean, I guess this is kind of the opposite of a safety system. It's still a defense in-depth, redundant model.
That would take out all of our nukes.
Yep.
Okay, so you've got credibility in that you're ready to go. You've got a second strike capability. But where the rubber meets the road is the last ingredient. And this is where the mind games begin.
red lines.
Red lines.
What it means by that.
You have to signal to your enemy what they would have to do to warrant an attack.
The signal to each other on what to do and what to not do. So you can create guardrails for your competition.
The cleanest and safest way to do.
There's guardrails with critical parameters in a nuclear plant as far as what if you exceed a set point, or not exceed. If you exceed a set point, the reactor shuts itself down automatically. But if you're getting close and it doesn't look like you're going to say it, the responsible thing to do is to emergency shut down the reactor and protect everyone.
This is to just say, hey, we will not attack anyone with our nukes unless they attack us with their nukes first. This is called a no first use policy, or nuclear doctrine. It's pretty straightforward, and it's much more about just protecting your national survival. And this is what China has articulated as their policy. Most countries operate
officially. There is some skepticism involved, noticeably by the U.S. around said threshold conditions, but yes, officially they do have a
with this as their kind of de facto policy. Don't attack us with nukes, or we'll nuke you back. It's a way of deterring anyone from trying to attack them.
Most other countries that has nuclear weapons fundamentally relies on them to assure the existence of their country. If you have nuclear weapons and they're survivable, your country's probably not going to be wiped off the map or be invaded.
But for the two big dogs on the stage, Russia and the United States, red lines are a way for them to kind of play mind games with each other, because they believe that it would incentivize their enemy to do everything short of a nuclear attack. Chemical weapon.
Also, the US and Russia have not adopted a formal no first use policy. There is some doctrine that allows for first use under certain scenarios within the US, which would include, say, threats to allies and infrastructure. And Russia is more ambiguous.
And conventional attacks, all these other things that we also want to deter. So both of them keep their red lines intentionally vague and fuzzy, forcing each other to constantly be questioning, where's the red line?
Okay, it's interesting. I actually think maybe it's what he studied, his expertise. He seems to be more knowledgeable about the geopolitical stuff than the physics stuff. I mean, he mentioned grad school studying stuff like this, so that's interesting.
Am I going too far? Am I going to trigger a nuclear strike if I do this or that? This keeps both sides very far away from provoking each other, because they're not sure where the red lines are. And this is the mind game at the heart of modern nuclear politics. It's a very dangerous mind game, but it's nonetheless the one we have.
If deterrence ever fails, then you just have this really terrible thing that could affect humanity's long-term survival.
I wouldn't get into the whole long-term survival. Even a worst-case nuclear exchange, you're not dealing with the extinction of humanity. There's just simply not enough weapons.
Okay, now time for some payoff. I'm going to apply this to the real world. We've been doing this kind of like conceptual, theoretical deterrence talk. I'm now going to show you how all of these ingredients and this deterrence plays out in the real world.
All right. Speaking as if we don't live in the real world. No, maybe I don't.
First, Ukraine.
People will say, didn't Western deterrence fail because Russia attacked at all? And I would say, absolutely not. In fact, it is a case study of how nuclear deterrence actually works.
I'm going to make a list of all the moves and counter moves that these two nuclear powers play on each other.
The day the conflict started, Putin announced that he was putting his nuclear forces on high alert. It didn't quite have the intended effect, so like a few days later, he remade the same announcement. This time he had a photograph taken. That's a nuclear signal.
I'm thinking more things where I think just causing this as a study of deterrence is an oversimplification.
He meant that specifically for people like me who read that kind of stuff to say, oh, they're serious. I better tell Biden that this is serious.
Russia has shamelessly violated the core tenets of the United Nations Charter.
Putin was very clearly manipulating nuclear risk. He wanted all of Europe to know that Russia had nuclear weapons, and they should remember that.
The West immediately responded with sanctions, punishing Russia's economy. But beyond that, there was a big debate. There was some fear, some deterrence. Should we send military troops? Should we send weapons? Maybe just send money? We don't want to cross Putin's line.
The Russians drew a number of what they wanted us to believe were very clear red lines. If you supply them with mobile artillery, it'll be World War III.
Whoever would try to stop us and further create threats to our country.
All right, let's define what mobile artillery. I'm assuming there's some there's some UN definition out there, but yeah.
Our people should know that
vague.
Russia's response will be immediate and lead you to such consequences that you have never faced in your history.
Interesting.
See what he's doing here? Like, do you see how vague that language is? It's grand, it's scary, it's not specific. This is a blurry
Some of it's just posturing, though.
red line that forces the West to fill in the blanks for themselves, to think twice before sending troops or sending support, because what if he's serious? All right, your move, NATO.
Hundreds of thousands of NATO troops on heightened alert.
We're also taking steps to defend our NATO allies, particularly in the East.
Putin's saber rattling did instill some fear in the West. So instead of sending troops to Ukraine, NATO deployed 40,000 of their troops to the border, just outside of Ukraine. And then the West responded by doing some signaling of their own, saying that the use of nuclear weapons would result in, quote, catastrophic consequences for Russia.
The wind of the conflict sort of blew some sand over the red lines, and they turned into pink fuzzy lines that the West eventually started to test and tolerate.
And then the NATO countries do start sending weapons, but they don't send them all at once. They're worried that might cross his line. So they have to calibrate their response, and they start sending weapons a little at a time. I mean, it wasn't a little, it was a lot of weapons, but they could have sent way more, and it could have actually made a big difference in Ukraine, but they didn't want to cross his red line. And they don't totally know where it is.
It's like adjusting a thermostat. Like, you don't want the temperature to get too hot.
That's just bad. I'm just saying, operating in a nuclear power plant, I mean, here we're talking about complex geopolitical maneuvering, but at least the red lines are pretty clearly defined. There's operating procedures, there's engineering vetting, and it's ultimately technical decisions. This is where it just gets harder.
You don't want to get too cold. Nuclear deterrence deeply frustrated not just the Russians, and deeply frustrated.
Now, you could model this sort of stuff, but it would all just be probability games. You just need to run a bunch of simulations.
The West had frustrated the Ukrainians. And so it's this thing we rely on for security, but it also endlessly, I think, makes the world we inhabit a lot more complicated to maneuver.
Throughout this war, Putin continues issuing nuclear threats. And then he moves some of his nukes to Belarus, another move on the chessboard. He even officially changes Russia's nuclear doctrine.
Okay, on the whole Belarus thing, I'm not sure if they're actually deployed or if they're just planned movements. That I just don't know.
Which is like their public-facing policy on when they'll use nukes. He changes it to have a lower threshold, like to make it easier for Russia to use nukes. The US is getting ready to send long-range missiles to Ukraine so that Ukraine can strike Russia deep into the country. But Putin says that if he does this, it's going to have big consequences, and it actually gives then President Biden some pause. He's deterred for a little bit, being like, am I going to cross a red line if I send these missiles to Ukraine? Eventually, the pressure mounted, and he did.
I mean, he's right about this sort of stuff, just unclear deterrence, unclear direction, not sure where the lines are.
Sending the long-range missiles. Ukraine used them. Russia was angry, but they didn't use nukes. It was once again a bluff. So ultimately, Putin did slow down the West's support, deterred them a little bit with his bluster.
They kind of worked, not as effectively as Russia would want. Putin's threats to slow American and Western support in ways that was deeply damaging to Ukraine's defense. But they did have a time-limited effect that eventually the West called their bluff.
People will talk about Putin's nuclear blackmail. And I'm sorry, I have no love for Vladimir Putin. There is no such thing as nuclear blackmail. It is all nuclear deterrence. What he was doing was practicing nuclear deterrence. We love deterring because it makes our national objectives easier to accomplish. But when the other guy does it to us, kind of ruins our day, and we call it nuclear blackmail.
I mean, listen, Russia and the United States, they've been playing this chess game of red lines and nuclear weapons since the 50s. So it's like they kind of know each other's red lines. And most experts I talked to were like, yeah, there was a lot of nuclear bluster, but like it...
Yeah, I guess it's kind of like just a complicated relationship. They know each other. They're best frenemies, if you will.
It was a lot of show. It was not actually close to a real strike. That being said, all it takes is one dude having a bad day and getting emotional about his pride and honor to change everything.
That's not limited to just the use of nuclear weapons. I'm just going to go ahead and say that. People have made a lot of horrible decisions based on pride in history. But a bad day does understate the safeguards such as dual key systems, launch authentication procedures and protocols, and deliberate planning. But human error and miscalculation are persistent risks, especially in autocratic regimes. Sure.
It's a really fragile, terrifying balance that relies on Vladimir Putin's brain. And during a lot of this, you saw like Russian elites and journalists and even policymakers like clamoring to use nuclear weapons.
That's an exaggeration.
To like reset the credibility. They're like, dude, you're losing the credibility. We're going to lose the deterrent. Use a small tactical nuke in Ukraine and your credibility will be restored.
A hawkish voice in...
What? All right. That is speculative and not to mention ethically fraught. I mean, sure, there are some hardliners out there that are going to think that, but man, that's a dangerous gamble. As a nuclear engineer whose thoughts are all about safety margins, no. And I'm sure most credible military analysts probably think the same way. Even tactical nukes. Just because of what people thinks of what a nuke is, even though tactical nukes aren't necessarily that powerful, the escalation is not worth any tactical gain or credibility gain or whatever.
Moscow is now advocating that Russia should launch a limited nuclear strike.
And certainly Putin considered that. But luckily, sanity prevailed and he didn't do it.
India, Pakistan, and China.
So India and Pakistan both have nukes, and this is really the only place where two nuclear powers fight each other directly. India has 172 nukes, and they use them not just to deter Pakistan, but also China.
Yes,
for a long time,
true.
India did what the big powers do and kept their red lines vague, using that ambiguity to make their neighbors think twice about trying to take any of this disputed territory up in the mountains. But in an effort to influence stability and be a responsible nuclear power, in the early 2000s, they said they were joining China to adopt a no first use policy, meaning they won't nuke anyone unless they get nuked first. Now, ironically, some have pointed out that this actually invites attacks up on these borders, as we've seen in recent years. So Pakistan has around 170 nukes as well, but they've opted to keep the vague red line that makes India's much more powerful military think twice before attempting to conquer any of this disputed territory. All right, nuclear deterrence is playing a huge role in Taiwan, where nuclear-armed China is constantly flexing its power as it becomes more and more powerful in the region, but is inconveniently for them running into this. This is America's nuclear umbrella in Asia. We call it an umbrella because it covers our allies. It's basically a promise to defend South Korea and Japan if they're ever attacked. And the red lines are pretty clear here. It's a reason why these countries feel safe and why they feel like they don't need to get a nuclear weapon for themselves because the US has their back. Okay? They've got a nuclear deterrent protecting them. But Taiwan is different. It is widely seen as like the top place on Earth where a miscalculation could escalate into war between two nuclear powers. Because China has vowed to take Taiwan. They believe that it's rightfully theirs, it always has been, and that eventually they will take it, even if by force. But deterrence is a major reason why they haven't done so yet. And it's the US that's playing.
Okay, it is one reason, though part of it is Taiwan is actually quite geographically difficult to invade, at least in the traditional way. China probably wants to avoid war, and I'm assuming they'd much rather take Taiwan through diplomatic, albeit coercive, ways.
The fuzzy red line game here. If China invades Taiwan, will the US come to its rescue? Who knows?
US forces, US men and women, would defend Taiwan in the event of a Chinese invasion.
Yes, if in fact there was an unprecedented attack.
Whoa.
Yeah, and difference in presidential regimes within the US. In this case, I think the US is trying to deter China without provoking China, but yeah, I get what he means about the lack of clarity.
Biden just said they would, but then seconds later, the White House retracted that statement and apologized.
The White House is now walking back President Biden's comments on Taiwan.
Officially, the U.S. will not say whether American forces would defend Taiwan.
That I will
Blurry red line. Will they protect Taiwan? Or will they not? Now, the US might be bluffing here. They might actually not be willing to go send their own troops in to confront China if they invade Taiwan, but they need Beijing to think that they might, because that is such a horrifying potential that it will prevent China from attacking in the first place. And that's deterrence.
This has turned into a bit more of a, the whole way scarier than you think of this video with nuclear weapons. None of this has anything to do, really, with nuclear weapons as of themselves. It's just psychology here. Oh boy, North Korea.
Okay, pan up here to another nuclear chess game of high stakes and irrational minds and fuzzy red lines.
North Korea has the world's lowest realistic threshold, I think, for nuclear weapons used today.
North Korea's got 50 warheads, and they actually have a very clear red line. They have stated that if the regime's survival is ever threatened, they will use their nukes. And by the regime, I mean the Kim family, the dictators who have ruled North Korea since its founding. This is a terrifying prospect, and they've really made us believe that this is a credible threat. They test their nukes. They're constantly like, dude, we're ready to attack if you ever get close to trying to overthrow the regime. And they easily could. The capital of South Korea is like right there. And as of 2017, they've got rockets that could send a nuclear...
They also have conventional weapons aimed at Seoul.
Weapon to the mainland United States. So now they really have a deterrent.
Allegedly.
That gives us pause before doing anything to provoke them.
When you're the president of the United States and you're deciding whether you're going to run that risk and you're going to go all the way to Pyongyang and remove Kim from power, knowing that he's got 10 ICBMs that could hit one of your cities, that is not a decision that you make in a cavalier manner.
Sure.
And so that is essentially the mechanism of deterrence, right? It is, as Dr. Strangelove says, it is creating in the mind of your enemy the fear to attack. And that is what Kim Jong-un is trying to do.
They use their nukes to basically ensure the survival and the reign of power of the Kim family. It's like a core part of what keeps them going. And of all the nuclear powers, they weaponize irrationality. I mean, this kind of theater of being like the crazy dictator with his like...
They weaponize irrationality. Yes, so do anti-nuclear people. And I'm talking anti-nuclear power, not anti-nuclear weapons.
On the trigger is a really powerful deterrent. It's a major reason why the US and South Korea and anyone won't get anywhere near the red line. And
I mean, that's kind of a funny one. Hey, it's a valid theory. I mean, he could use the appearance of volatility as a calculated psychological tool. Yeah, it could be coldly strategic reasons, like when people pretend to be insane.
Forces the United States to grapple with whether or not they would provoke a nuclear attack on their soil to protect South Korea. Deterrence has so far kept the whole thing in this sort of tense, scary balance, but that could change any minute, and hopefully it doesn't.
Can we just stop the nukes?
So, can we just stop the nukes, please? Can we as humanity just agree that this is completely irrational, totally insane, that we've invented these things and that we wield them? And can we all just agree that it would be better to not have them at all? Could we? Ooh, I wish, but it's a little more complicated. I mean, 73 countries have signed a treaty saying they'll never develop nukes. Could we just...
So the Treaty on Non-Proliferation of Nuclear Weapons actually has 191 signatories. But I think what he's referring to is the Treaty on Prohibition of Nuclear Weapons, which has not been signed by any nuclear-armed country or NATO state. So what does it matter?
Get everyone else to do it? Seems sensible. Unfortunately, most experts I talk to say it's not quite that simple.
Unfortunately, you can't uninvent the technology, and actually, sudden disarmament would put you in a much more dangerous position.
Okay, and that is such a shallow argument, too. I mean, when it comes to stuff like forgetting technology, I mean, arms control treaties like START have been effective in reducing risks if politically supported. So just, you could go about reducing numbers, but forgetting the technology, yeah, that's not a thing.
Where any country could suddenly leap into a position of massive power by just committing to building lots and lots of nuclear warheads.
We still live in a world where big countries are skeptical of each other. There's no central authority governing everyone. And so countries naturally compete with each other. They're constantly trying to one-up each other to protect themselves and scare their enemy. That is like a natural law of international relations. I hope it's not the case someday, because it really, our world would be much better if we all just cooperated. But for now, this is how we do it. The current arrangement is that, yes, we do diplomacy and we do some international law, but a major stabilizer for the big empires is everyone having a gun pointed at each other so that no one does anything crazy. It gives way to a bunch of other types of conflict. Proxy wars, we've talked a lot about on this channel.
Sure.
But for now, it has kept the big powers from going into a full cataclysmic war.
And unfortunately, half of this community just says, we need to get rid of all nuclear weapons tomorrow! Ah! And the other half says, no, we need nuclear weapons for everything, including stopping asteroids. Ah! We need everyone to take a deep breath and think strategically.
Okay, Nukes stopping asteroids. I think maybe they just watched the movie Armageddon. No.
Basically, I'm thinking the longer term.
So how do we manage this then? During the Cold War, we saw the US and the Soviet Union figure out a way to work together while still having nukes. They could still do the deterrence thing, the credibility, the red lines, all of that. But instead of just constantly one-upping each other, they started to reduce. And that's how we went from having tens of thousands of nukes to just having 12,000 today. What's tricky about this new...
But they reduced their nukes because of deterrence, not instead of deterrence. It was a strategic decision grounded in mutual deterrence. That's my understanding of why these treaties occurred. And reductions of past arsenals were thought of as overkill, and this was about stability through survivability and redundancy, not, I don't know, some sort of idealistic disargument against nukes.
World we're entering into
disarmament
is that it's not just two powers.
The Soviet Union went poof, and we had this moment of global nuclear optimism. Today, it's like all of the dynamics are heading in the wrong direction. We have competitive great power dynamics. We have new entrants like North Korea. We have India and Pakistan like innovating in their own way about how they want to fight wars under the nuclear shadow. And so all of that takes us to a place where, unfortunately, this broader toolkit that we have relied on to render this enterprise of nuclear deterrence somewhat more predictable and manageable for mankind is under great strain.
I think we'll move towards safer, smaller ones. More.
What? What is he talking about? Safer, smaller nukes?
I don't know. I mean, I think the US and Russia are going to stay stable, but it depends on what China does. If China...
Wait, is he talking about safer, smaller countries? All nuclear states face the same risk. Accidental launch, escalation, miscalculation, and the overall instability. Even forget the whole nuclear exchange. The smaller countries, such as North Korea, have a less robust command and control and safeguard procedures for their nuclear weapons.
Matches them? Does Russia feel like they need to be bigger than China? I don't know. And if Russia races, does the US race? And then does this become a congressional thing where we say, it has to be US equals Russia plus China plus one? Well, then what happens when North Korea hits 1,000? Or what happens...
Did he just say North Korea hitting 1,000 warheads? That's absurd. I know this guy's firing off the cuff, but they're nowhere near 1,000. That requires enrichment scale, plutonium processing, and advanced metallurgy and stockpile management, which they do not have in order to get there. There is no legitimate way for them to reach 1,000 warheads without some dramatic change in North Korea, including other countries helping North Korea reach 1,000 warheads.
I mean, if we're racing, then and again, because of the asymmetries of all these races, then everybody ends up, do we end up with everybody with 10,000 of these things? I hope not. That I really think we could have talks to get out of.
China seems to be building their nuclear arsenal very quickly, and they are not telling the world why.
Why is China doing this buildup? That is still being debated.
There's a few theories. Matching U.S. capabilities, getting second strike potential. I think they're just changing their posture instead of just deterrence to having a more survivable and flexible force. That's also speculation.
Jinping has not given us a speech telling us why we're seeing more nuclear weapons in China. Imaginations have run wild in Washington a little bit about what China's goals are here.
There was a moment during the Cold War where it got really bad. Cuba, the Cuban Missile Crisis, you probably heard of it. It's the closest we ever got to actually going full bore into a nuclear war with the Soviet Union. And that...
Sure. That's as closest as we've gotten historically, but it also involves secret concessions such as the withdrawal of Jupiter missiles from Turkey. So it's just complex. That's all I'm going to say.
Sort of woke everyone up to the insanity. It sort of gave us the picture of how close we were to mass annihilation. And it was that crisis that helped the two countries.
I'm just going to go ahead and address the elephant. So a full-scale U.S. and Russia nuclear exchange would be catastrophic, but not annihilation extinction level for all life, even at the height of the Cold War. Even if they had even more weapons and more were developed that all of NATO, Russia, China, and key allies would wipe out, much of Africa, South America, Oceania, and other parts of Asia would still be all right. Not to mention rural populations And I think a lot of that comes from 1980s movies like The Day After or Threads or something. And that's even taken nuclear winter into account. They used exaggerated fire assumptions. They assumed hundreds of megatons of soot, not hundreds of megatons of nuclear blast yield, I mind you, just of pure soot into the atmosphere. And it didn't take into account that most would be rained out or dispersed. So you might see a couple of degrees global temperature drop. It actually offsets some of how much temperature has risen due to global climate change, but it would be horrific, but not total extinction. And you do not want to stress test it, but ultimately, they're not scarier than you think, talking about nuclear weapons.
Increase communication lines with each other. Put in place some frameworks to make sure that nothing crazy happens. And it really did stabilize the world and eventually led to the reduction of all of these nukes. We're going to need to do that again.
That is perfectly valid. Crisis communication, hotlines, military to military deconfliction, and a shift in doctrine. Yes, that is probably what is needed.
We're going to have those conversations again. The question is it going to take another scary crisis and a close call to get us there?
What is it we really want? We want peace and stability. We want us all to be able to survive for another generation. How do we do that best? We need to defend ourselves, and we need to redevelop the habit of thinking more strategically and diplomacy and talking to our adversaries in order to try to avoid the next conflict and get to somewhere with peace. The hard work needs to happen now.
That was an interesting one. Yeah, he definitely seems like he knows more about geopolitics than he does about nuclear engineering or nuclear physics. Thanks so much for the recommendation, and thanks so much for watching. I'll see you next time.